Hello, dear listeners, and a warm welcome to Soft History, the quiet corner where we travel slowly through the deep past together. Tonight, we follow a story that stretches across more than 4,000 years, a story so long that whole nations rose and fell within it like waves upon a single endless shore. Imagine a civilization so old that when the pyramids of Egypt were still new, its first kings were already shaping the muddy banks of a great river, and that same civilization is still alive today, speaking a language that carries words from those ancient days. No other living culture on Earth can claim such a thing. Empires far younger than China have vanished completely, leaving only ruins and silence. Yet China endured through floods and famines, through invasions and broken thrones, always finding a way to begin again. The story we will follow tonight is the story of how a people learned to last. It begins on a wide and dusty plain in the north of what we now call China, where a yellow river twists across the land like a sleeping dragon. From that river came farmers and kings, poets and soldiers, builders and dreamers, each generation passing something forward to the next. We will travel through dynasties whose names rang across the ancient world: the Xie and the Shang, the mighty Qin, the wise Han, the golden Tang, and many more. We will see China conquered and broken, and we will see it rise once more, again and again, until it became the longest-lasting civilization the world has ever known. But before we go any further, I want to take a moment. On this channel, we explore fascinating subjects in calm and careful detail. These journeys are made to help you relax, focus, or simply enjoy the flow of discovery. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Is it day or night where you are? What time is it? Are you tuning in while studying, working, commuting, or simply winding down? Drop your answer in the comments below. It is always wonderful to hear from you. And if you enjoy content like this, please support the channel by liking this video and subscribing. It helps us bring you more of these journeys. Now let us go back to the very beginning, to a time before kings and before cities, when there was only the river and the people who chose to live beside it. The Yellow River is one of the great rivers of the world, and it earned its name from the fine yellow soil it carries down from the highlands far to the west. This soil is called loess, and it is soft, pale, and easy to plow. For thousands of years, the river spread this soil across a wide flat plain, building up rich farmland where almost anything could grow. To the first people who settled there, this must have felt like a gift from the heavens. They could plant millet and other grains in the soft earth and gather enough to feed their families through the cold northern winters. Slowly, small villages grew along the banks, with houses dug partly into the ground and roofs made of woven branches and packed mud. At night, the air smelled of wood smoke and damp soil, and the only sounds were the wind across the fields and the steady murmur of the water moving past in the dark. Yet the river that gave so much could also take everything away. The Yellow River was wild and unpredictable, and it had a terrible habit of bursting its banks without warning. When the heavy rains came, the water would rise and rise until it spilled across the plain, drowning fields and villages alike. Whole communities could vanish beneath the brown floodwaters in a single night, and the survivors would crawl back to rebuild on the same dangerous ground. The river changed its course many times over the centuries, sometimes shifting hundreds of miles, carving new paths through the land and leaving old riverbeds dry and empty. Because of this, the people gave it another name, a darker one. They called it China's sorrow, for it brought as much grief as it brought life. And here we find the first great lesson of this long story. The people of the Yellow River could not run away from their home, because the same floods that destroyed them also created the rich soil that fed them. So instead of fleeing, they learned to stay and to fight. They began to dig channels to guide the water, to build low walls of packed earth to hold it back, and to work together across whole villages to manage the river as one. No single family could tame a river so vast, but many families working together could. This need to cooperate, to organize, and to plan for the future shaped the Chinese people from their earliest days. The river taught them patience. It taught them that survival came not from strength alone, but from working together and refusing to give up. That lesson, learned at the very beginning, would carry them through everything that was yet to come. The story of China's first rulers begins in shadow, in a time so distant that history and legend blur together like mist over morning water. The very first dynasty was said to be the Xia, a line of kings who ruled the river plains long before anyone wrote down what truly happened. For many years, scholars were not even sure the Xia had ever existed at all, because the only stories about them came from books written long after they were said to have vanished. Some believed the Xia were only a beautiful legend, a tale the Chinese told themselves about where they came from. But the people of China never doubted it. To them, the Xia were the root of the tree, the first branch of an unbroken line that stretched all the way down to their own day. At the heart of the Xia story stands one of the most beloved figures in all of Chinese memory, a man known as Yu the Great. In the time before Yu, the great floods of the Yellow River were said to have grown so terrible that the whole world seemed to drown. The water covered the fields and the hills, and the people had nowhere to go. Yu's own father had tried to stop the floods by building walls and dams to block the water, but the river always broke through, and the walls only made things worse. Yu watched his father fail, and he learned from it. When his turn came to face the waters, he chose a different path entirely. Instead of trying to block the river, Yu decided to guide it. He gathered the people together, and they dug long channels and canals to lead the floodwaters away to the sea. Rather than fighting the river head-on, he worked with its nature, giving the water somewhere to go. The old stories say that Yu labored for 13 long years to control the floods, and that he worked so hard he passed by the door of his own home 3 times without stopping to go inside, because there was always more work to be done. His hands grew rough and his body grew thin, but he never rested while his people suffered. When at last the waters drained away and the fields rose dry and green from the mud, the people were so grateful that they made Yu their king. And so, the legend says, the first dynasty was born not from conquest or cruelty, but from a man who saved his people from the water. Whether Yu truly lived exactly as the stories say, we cannot be certain. But in recent times, archaeologists digging in the river valleys found the remains of an ancient city with palaces and bronze workshops dating to the very time the Xia was said to rule. These quiet ruins suggest that something real did stand behind the legend, that there truly was an early kingdom on the river plains. The Xia rulers, real or remembered, marked the moment when scattered villages began to come together under a single line of kings. Power was no longer shared among many small chiefs, but gathered into one royal family that passed the throne from father to son. This was a profound change, for it meant that China would be ruled not by elected leaders, but by dynasties, families who held the throne until they were overthrown and replaced by another. The idea of Yu the Great would echo through all of Chinese history. He became the model of the perfect ruler, the king who put his people before himself, who solved problems through wisdom and patience, rather than force. Long after the Jia were gone, Chinese emperors would measure themselves against his memory, asking whether they too served their people as faithfully as he had. In this way, the very first ruler, half legend though he may be, planted an idea that would guide China for thousands of years. A good ruler works for the people. A good ruler tames the chaos and brings order. And a good ruler, like you beside the river, never stops working while his people are still in need. The first dynasty we can truly prove existed came after the Jia, and it was called the Shang. With the Shang, we step out of the misty world of legend and into solid history, because the Shang left behind things we can touch and read even today. They ruled the Yellow River Plain for several hundred years, and during that time, they built a powerful kingdom with great walled cities, skilled craftsmen, and kings who commanded armies of thousands. The Shang were warriors and traders, but above all, they were makers of beautiful things, and the most beautiful of all were their works in bronze. To make bronze, the Shang melted copper and tin together and poured the glowing metal into clay molds, creating vessels of stunning detail and strength. These bronze vessels were not made for everyday use. They were sacred objects, used in solemn ceremonies to honor the spirits of dead ancestors. The Shang believed deeply that the spirits of their grandparents and great-grandparents still watched over the living, and that these ancestors had the power to help or harm the family, depending on how well they were treated. So the Shang filled their bronze vessels with wine and food, and offered them to the dead in grand rituals. The vessels were covered in swirling patterns and the faces of strange beasts, designs so intricate that even modern craftsmen marvel at how they were made. When these vessels were new, they would have gleamed a warm golden color in the firelight of the temples, and the air around them would have been thick with the smell of burning incense and offered wine. But the greatest treasure the Shang left us was not their bronze, it was their writing. The Shang kings wanted to know the future, and to ask the spirits for guidance, they used a method we now call oracle bones. A priest would take the flat shoulder bone of an ox or the bottom shell of a turtle and carve a question into its surface. The question might ask whether the harvest would be good, whether a battle would be won, or whether a royal child would be born healthy. Then the priest would press a heated rod against the bone until it cracked from the heat, and the pattern of the cracks was read as the answer from the spirits. Afterward, the priest would carve the answer into the bone beside the question, keeping a record of what had been asked and what had come true. Thousands of these oracle bones survived, buried in the earth for over 3,000 years, until farmers and scholars began to dig them up. And when scholars learned to read the marks carved upon them, they made a stunning discovery. The symbols on the oracle bones were the ancestors of the very same writing system used in China today. The Chinese script that students learn now grew directly from those marks scratched into burned bone by Shang priests so long ago. This is one of the most remarkable facts in all of human history. While the ancient scripts of Egypt and Mesopotamia were forgotten and had to be decoded by modern scholars after thousands of years of silence, Chinese writing never died. It changed and grew, but it never broke. A reader today can look at a character on an oracle bone and recognize the seed of a word still written every single day. This unbroken thread of writing became one of the deepest reasons China endured for so long. Writing allowed knowledge to be passed down across the centuries without being lost. A scholar in one age could read the words of a scholar who had lived 1,000 years before. Laws, histories, poems, and ideas could be stored and shared and remembered. When a dynasty fell, the writing remained. and the new rulers could read the records of the old. In this way, each generation stood upon the shoulders of all the generations before it, never having to start over from nothing. The Shang priests, cracking their bones in the firelight to glimpse the future, could never have known that the marks they carved would become the memory of an entire civilization, carrying its voice forward across more than 3,000 years of history. The Shang dynasty did not last forever. In time, its kings grew cruel and careless, and a people from the western edge of the kingdom rose up to challenge them. These were the Zhou, and around 3,000 years ago, they gathered their armies and overthrew the last Shang king in a great battle. The Zhou would go on to rule for longer than any other dynasty in all of Chinese history, holding the throne for nearly 800 years. But what mattered most about the Zhou was not how long they ruled. It was an idea they brought with them, a single powerful belief that would shape the way China thought about power forever after. This idea was called the Mandate of Heaven. The Zhou faced a difficult problem when they took the throne. The Shang had ruled for centuries, and many people believed the Shang kings had a sacred right to rule. How could the Zhou explain that they had overthrown these kings and taken their place? Their answer was both simple and brilliant. They declared that heaven itself chose who should rule China. Heaven gave a worthy family the right to govern, and this right was called the mandate. But the mandate came with a condition. A ruler kept the mandate of heaven only as long as he ruled well, with justice and care for his people. If a king became cruel, greedy, or selfish, then heaven would take the mandate away from him and give it to someone better. The Shang, the Zhou explained, had lost the mandate through their wickedness, and heaven had passed it to the Zhou instead. This idea was unlike anything in the world at that time. In many ancient lands, kings claimed to be gods themselves, or to rule by a right that could never be questioned. But the mandate of heaven said something different and far more challenging. It said that no ruler was above judgment. A king was not a god, but a servant of heaven, and he could be removed if he failed. This gave the people a kind of quiet power, because it meant that a ruler who abused them had broken his sacred duty and deserved to fall. It also gave rebels a reason to rise up, for they could always claim that the current ruler had lost the mandate and that heaven now favored a new family. How could anyone know when a ruler had lost the mandate of heaven? The signs were read in the world itself. If floods drowned the fields, if earthquakes shook the cities, if famine spread and the people starved, if rebellions broke out across the land, these were taken as warnings that heaven was displeased. A wise ruler watched for these signs and tried to govern justly so that heaven would smile upon his reign. A foolish ruler ignored them until it was too late, and his dynasty crumbled. In this way, the mandate of heaven tied the fate of every ruler to the well-being of the land and its people. A king who let his people suffer was a king who would not rule for long. The mandate of heaven became the heartbeat of Chinese politics for the next 3,000 years. Every dynasty that rose to power claimed they had received the mandate, and every dynasty that fell was said to have lost it. When one royal family was overthrown and another took its place, this was not seen as mere violence or chance. It was seen as heaven correcting a mistake, removing a failed ruler and choosing a better one. This belief gave Chinese history its great rhythm, a long cycle of dynasties rising in strength, ruling for a time, growing weak and corrupt, and finally falling to make way for the next. The Chinese came to see this cycle as natural and even necessary, like the turning of the seasons. The Zhou themselves eventually fell victim to the very cycle they had described. For the first few centuries, their kings ruled strongly over a kingdom held together by loyal nobles. But over time, these nobles grew powerful in their own lands and stopped obeying the Zhou kings. Slowly, the central power of the Zhou faded until the king ruled in name only, while the real power lay scattered among dozens of local lords who governed their own territories as they pleased. The great kingdom began to break apart into many smaller states, each with its own ruler, its own army, and its own ambitions. The mandate of heaven still hung over them all, but no single family held it firmly anymore. China was drifting toward an age of division and war, and yet, strangely, this troubled time would become one of the most brilliant in all its history. As the power of the Zhou kings faded, China entered a long age of conflict known as the Warring States. The land was divided into many rival kingdoms, and these kingdoms fought one another endlessly for land and power. Armies marched across the countryside, cities were besieged, and the common people suffered through war after war with little rest. It was a hard and frightening time to be alive, an age when no one knew which kingdom would survive and which would be swallowed by its neighbors. The old order had broken down, and the future was uncertain. Yet from this very chaos came something unexpected and beautiful, for it was in these troubled centuries that China produced its greatest thinkers. When the world falls into disorder, people begin to ask deep questions. Why has everything gone wrong? How should people live? What makes a good ruler, and what makes a good person? During the Warring States, so many thinkers tried to answer these questions that later generations called this period the Age of 100 Schools of Thought. Wise men traveled from kingdom to kingdom, gathering students and offering their ideas about how to bring peace and order back to the world. Some of these thinkers would be forgotten, but a few would shape the Chinese mind so deeply that their words are still studied and followed today, more than 2,000 years later. The greatest of these thinkers was a man named Confucius, whom the Western world later called Confucius. He lived during the early part of this troubled age, and he was deeply saddened by the violence and disorder he saw around him. Confucius believed the answer lay not in stronger armies or harsher laws, but in goodness, respect, and proper behavior. He taught that society would be peaceful if everyone treated others with kindness and respect, if children honored their parents, if rulers cared for their people, and if people kept their promises and behaved with honesty. He believed that learning and self-improvement could make a person better, and that a good society was built one good person at a time. His ideas spread slowly during his life, for few rulers wished to hear that they should rule with virtue rather than force. But after his death, his students wrote down his teachings, and over the centuries, his ideas became the foundation of Chinese morality and government. Another great thinker of this age was a mysterious figure known as Laozi, the founder of a way of thinking called Taoism. Where Confucius focused on duty and proper behavior, Laozi looked to nature and quiet simplicity. He taught that people should live in harmony with the natural flow of the world, which he called the Tao, meaning the way. He believed that the wisest path was often to do less rather than more, to be soft like water, which seems weak, yet wears away the hardest stone over time. Laozi distrusted grand ambitions and constant striving, and he taught that true peace came from letting go and living simply. His gentle and mysterious ideas offered a kind of calm escape from the noise and struggle of the warring world, and they would balance the strict duties of Confucius in the Chinese soul for all the centuries to come. These two ways of thinking, the ordered duty of Confucius and the flowing simplicity of Laozi, became like two halves of a single heart, A Chinese person might follow the teachings of Confucius in their public life, working hard, respecting their elders, and serving the state, while turning to the gentle wisdom of Laozi in their private moments, seeking peace in nature and quiet. Together with other schools of thought, these ideas gave China something deeper than any army or wall. They gave it a shared way of seeing the world, a common set of values that bound people together, even when the land was divided. When kingdoms fell and rulers changed, these ideas remained, passed from teacher to student across the generations. The age of war had given birth to the philosophy that would become the lasting soul of China. Among the warring kingdoms, there was one that grew stronger and hungrier than all the rest. This was the state of Qin, which lay in the far west of China, on the rough frontier where the settled lands met the wild lands beyond. The people of Qin were known as tough fighters, hardened by life on the edge of the empire, and their rulers cared little for the gentle teachings of Confucius. Instead, the Qin followed a harsh philosophy known as legalism, which taught that people obeyed only out of fear and that a strong state needed strict laws and severe punishments. Under this cold and ruthless system, the Qin built a powerful war machine with a disciplined army, an organized government, and a single-minded determination to conquer all of China. The man who completed this conquest was one of the most important and most feared figures in all of Chinese history. He was born a prince of Qin, and he became king of his state while still young. He was clever, suspicious, tireless, and utterly determined to rule everything under heaven. One by one, he sent his armies against the other kingdoms, and one by one they fell before the might of Qin. The wars were terrible, and the cost in human life was vast, for the Qin showed little mercy to those who stood against them. But when the fighting was finally over, something happened that had never happened before. For the first time in history, all of the warring kingdoms were united under a single ruler. The long age of division was over, and one man held the entire Chinese world in his hands. This king gave himself a new title to match his unprecedented power. He called himself Qin Shi Huang, which means the first emperor of Qin. The old word for king was no longer grand enough for a man who ruled all under heaven, so he created the title of emperor, a word that would be used by every supreme ruler of China for the next 2,000 years. Qin Shi Huang believed he had founded a dynasty that would last for 10,000 generations, an empire so strong that it would never fall. He set about reshaping the conquered lands into a single unified state, and the changes he made were so deep and so lasting that they bound China together in ways that have never been undone. The first emperor knew that conquering the kingdoms was only the beginning. To truly make them one country, he had to erase the differences between them. So he ordered that all of China use the same system of writing, so that a scholar in the East could read a letter from the West without confusion. He ordered that everyone use the same money, the same weights, and the same measures, so that trade could flow smoothly across the whole land. He even ordered that the axles of carts be made the same width everywhere, so that wheels would fit into the same ruts on the roads no matter where they traveled. He built a vast network of roads spreading out from his capital like the spokes of a wheel, so that his armies and his messengers could move quickly across the empire. These changes turned a patchwork of separate kingdoms into a single connected nation, and many of them have endured in some form to this very day. The first emperor also feared the threat that came from beyond his northern borders, where fierce nomadic horsemen raided the settled lands. To keep them out, he ordered that the old defensive walls built by the separate kingdoms be joined together into one great barrier stretching across the north of China. Hundreds of thousands of workers, many of them prisoners and forced laborers, were driven to build this wall through harsh mountains and empty deserts. Countless people died in the brutal labor, and it was said that their bones were buried in the very foundations of the wall. This was the first great version of what would later become the famous Great Wall of China, a stone dragon winding across the mountains, a symbol of both the strength and the terrible cost of the first emperor's vision. Yet for all his power, Qin Shi Huang was a man haunted by a single fear. He was terrified of death. As he grew older, he became obsessed with finding a way to live forever, sending out expeditions to search for a magic potion that would grant him eternal life. No such potion was ever found, and in the end, the great emperor died like all men before him. But he had prepared for death on a scale no one had ever imagined. Near his capital, he ordered the building of an enormous underground tomb, a hidden world meant to serve him in the afterlife. To guard him forever, he had an entire army made of clay, thousands upon thousands of life-size soldiers, each one with its own unique face, standing in silent ranks beneath the earth. This was the Terracotta Army, and it lay buried and forgotten for over 2,000 years until farmers digging a well stumbled upon it. Those silent clay warriors still stand today, gazing out across the centuries, a frozen guard for an emperor who longed to live forever and instead became immortal in stone. The mighty Qin dynasty, which the first emperor believed would last 10,000 generations, did not even survive his own son. The harsh laws and crushing labor that had built the empire had also filled the people with resentment and rage. The Qin had ruled through fear, and fear cannot hold a people forever. After the first emperor died, the burden of his cruel system grew unbearable, and rebellions broke out across the land. Within only a few years of his death, the great Qin Empire collapsed into chaos and war once more. The dynasty that had united all of China crumbled almost as quickly as it had risen. It was a powerful lesson, one the Chinese would never forget. An empire built on fear alone, no matter how strong, could not endure. From the ruins of the fallen Qin, a new dynasty arose, and it would become one of the greatest in all of Chinese history. This was the Han Dynasty, founded by a man of humble birth named Liu Bang. Unlike the proud first emperor, Liu Bang had not been born a prince. He had started life as a minor village official, a common man who rose through the turmoil of rebellion to seize the throne. Perhaps because of his humble beginnings, Liu Bang understood the people in a way the cold Qin rulers never had. He knew that the people were exhausted by war and crushed by harsh laws, and that what they longed for above all was peace and rest. So the early Han rulers did something wise. They kept the strong unified state that the Qin had built, with its single writing, its roads, and its central government, but they softened the brutal harshness that had destroyed the Qin. They lightened the heavy taxes that had burdened the farmers. They eased the cruel laws and reduced the savage punishments. They gave the weary land time to recover, allowing the fields to grow green again and the people to rebuild their lives in peace. This was the great genius of the Han. They learned from the mistakes of the Qin and combined firm rule with mercy and care. They proved that an empire could be strong without being cruel, and in doing so, they discovered the secret of how to make a dynasty last not just for years, but for centuries. The Han Dynasty made another choice that would shape China for thousands of years. They turned away from the cold legalism of the Qin and embraced instead the gentle teachings of Confucius. The Han rulers decided that government should be run by educated officials who were trained in the wisdom of Confucius, men who valued virtue, learning, and proper behavior. To find such men, they began to build a system of examinations, tests that anyone could take to prove their knowledge and earn a position in the government. This was a revolutionary idea. It meant that, at least in principle, a poor farmer's son who studied hard could rise to serve the emperor himself. Over the centuries, this system of exams would grow into one of the foundations of Chinese government, creating a class of learned officials who ran the empire with skill and wisdom passed down through the ages. Under the Han, China grew strong, prosperous, and confident. The empire expanded its borders, pushing outward in all directions until it covered a vast territory. Its cities grew large and busy, filled with markets, workshops, and temples. The Han people were so successful and so proud of their civilization that even today the largest group of people in China call themselves the Han, taking their name from this golden dynasty that lived 2,000 years ago. This was an age of great achievement in every field, from poetry and music to science and engineering. Han craftsmen and inventors created wonders that the rest of the world would not match for many hundreds of years. One of the most important inventions of the Han Age was something we use every single day without a second thought. It was paper. Before paper, the Chinese wrote on strips of bamboo tied together into heavy bundles, or on expensive rolls of silk that few could afford. Bamboo books were so heavy that a single text might fill an entire cart. Then, during the Han Dynasty, a clever official worked out how to make a thin, light, smooth material by soaking and pressing plant fibers together until they dried into sheets. This new material was cheap, light, and easy to write on, and it changed the world forever. Paper made it far easier to record knowledge, to copy books, and to spread ideas across the empire. It would take more than 1,000 years for this simple Chinese invention to reach the distant lands of Europe, but when it did, it would help transform the entire world. The Han Dynasty did more than strengthen China within its own borders. It also reached out beyond them, opening a path that would connect China to lands it had never known before. The emperor sent an explorer named Zhang Qian on a long and dangerous journey into the unknown West, hoping to find allies against the fierce nomads who threatened the northern frontier. Zhang Qian traveled for many years across harsh deserts and towering mountains, and though he was captured and held prisoner along the way, he eventually returned with something more valuable than any alliance. He returned with knowledge of distant kingdoms and peoples that the Chinese had never imagined existed. He told of great cities far to the west, of strange goods and unfamiliar customs, of a whole world beyond the edge of the known. From Zhang Qian's journeys grew one of the most famous trade routes in all of human history, a network of roads that we now call the Silk Road. It was not a single road, but a web of paths and trails stretching for thousands of miles, linking China to the lands of Central Asia, to Persia, to India, and eventually all the way to the great Roman Empire in the far west. Along these routes traveled long caravans of camels and merchants, carrying precious goods across some of the harshest landscapes on earth. The journey was slow, dangerous, and exhausting, crossing scorching deserts where the sand stretched to the horizon and freezing mountain passes where the air grew thin and cold. Few merchants traveled the entire length of the road. Instead, goods passed from trader to trader, moving slowly across the continent like water seeping through stone. The most prized treasure that flowed westward along these routes was the very thing that gave the road its name. It was silk, the soft, shimmering cloth that only the Chinese knew how to make. The Chinese had discovered long ago that the cocoons of silkworms could be unwound into long, fine threads and woven into a fabric of incredible smoothness and beauty. For centuries, China guarded the secret of how silk was made, and the rest of the world had no idea where this magical cloth came from. In the distant lands of the West, silk was so rare and so beautiful that it was worth its weight in gold. Roman nobles draped themselves in Chinese silk without ever knowing the land that produced it, imagining it grew on trees in some far-off paradise. But silk was far from the only thing that traveled the road. From China came spices, fine porcelain, tea, and many other goods, while from the West came horses, gold, glass, wool, and exotic plants and animals the Chinese had never seen. The desert markets must have been wonders to behold, crowded with merchants speaking a dozen languages, the air thick with the smells of spices and animals and dust, the stalls piled high with goods from the far corners of the known world. In these busy trading towns, people from many different lands met and mingled, sharing not only their goods, but their stories and their ways of life. The Silk Road became a great river of trade flowing across the heart of Asia, carrying the wealth of nations back and forth across the world. Yet the most important things that traveled the Silk Road were not goods at all. They were ideas. Along with silk and spices, the road carried beliefs, inventions, and knowledge from one civilization to another. The most powerful of these was a new religion that came traveling eastward from distant India. It was Buddhism, the teaching of a wise man who had sought an end to human suffering through peace and understanding. Buddhist monks made the long and difficult journey along the Silk Road into China, carrying their sacred texts and their gentle message. Over the centuries, Buddhism took deep root in Chinese soil, growing into one of the great faiths of the land, sitting alongside the older teachings of Confucius and Laozi. In this way, the Silk Road did more than make China rich. It opened the Chinese mind to the wider world and wove China into the great web of human civilization that stretched all the way across Asia. No dynasty, however great, could escape the cycle of rise and fall. After ruling for around 400 years, the mighty Han dynasty grew old and weak. Its later emperors were often children, controlled by scheming officials and powerful court figures who fought one another for power behind the throne. Corruption spread through the government like rot through old wood. The taxes grew heavy again, and the common people suffered as the great families gathered wealth and land into their own hands. Then came natural disasters, floods and famines that the failing government could not manage. To the Chinese, these were clear signs that the Han had lost the mandate of heaven. Desperate and starving, the peasants rose up in great rebellions, and the once mighty empire began to tear itself apart. When the Han dynasty finally collapsed, China did not simply pass to a new dynasty as it had before. Instead, it shattered into pieces, and a long age of division began. For nearly 400 years, China was split among rival kingdoms and warring states, with no single ruler able to hold it all together. It was a time of constant conflict, of armies marching across the land, of thrones rising and falling with bewildering speed. In the north, waves of nomadic peoples from beyond the frontier swept into the Chinese heartland, setting up their own kingdoms and ruling over the Chinese population. In the south, refugees fled the chaos of the north and built new states along the great Yangtze River. China seemed broken beyond repair, a once great civilization scattered like leaves in the wind. And yet, something remarkable happened during these long centuries of division. China broke apart, but the idea of China did not die. Even as the land was divided among many rulers, The people never forgot that they shared one civilization, one written language, one set of beliefs, and one long history reaching back through the dynasties to the very beginning. The writing remained the same across all the divided lands, so that a scholar in the south could still read the words of a scholar in the north. The teachings of Confucius and the wisdom of Laozi survived. The Buddhist faith spread and grew, offering comfort to people in a troubled age. Through all the chaos, the deep roots of Chinese culture held firm beneath the surface, waiting for the day when the land could be made whole again. This is one of the great secrets of why Chinese civilization lasted so long. It was held together not only by armies and emperors, but by something deeper and harder to destroy. It was held together by a shared way of life, by writing and learning and belief, by the memory of a common past. A kingdom can be conquered and a throne can be overthrown, but it is far harder to destroy the ideas that live in the hearts and minds of a whole people. During these long, dark centuries, China, the country, had fallen, but China, the civilization, endured, sleeping like a seed beneath the winter snow, holding within it everything it needed to grow again when spring at last returned. And in time, after almost 400 years of division, a new dynasty would arise to reunite the land and lead China into its most brilliant age of all. After the long centuries of division, China was at last reunited, and from this reunion arose the dynasty that many consider the most glorious in all of Chinese history. This was the Tang dynasty, and its golden age stands as one of the brightest moments, not just for China, but for all of human civilization. Under the Tang, China became the richest, most powerful, and most advanced country in the entire world. Its borders stretched far in every direction, its armies were strong, and its government was wise and well organized. But what made the Tang truly golden was not only its power, it was the dazzling brilliance of its culture, the flowering of poetry, art, music, and learning that lit up the age like the sun, rising over the eastern mountains. At the heart of the Tang world stood its magnificent capital city, called Chang'an. In its time, Chang'an was the greatest city on the face of the earth, home to perhaps 1 million people, larger and grander than any other city in the world. The city was laid out in a vast grid of wide straight avenues, surrounded by enormous walls of packed earth that stretched for miles. Within those walls lay bustling markets, grand palaces, soaring temples, and the homes of 1 million souls. The streets of Chang'an were filled with people from every corner of Asia and beyond, for the city was a great gathering place where merchants, scholars, monks, and travelers came from distant lands. There were Persians and Arabs, Indians and Koreans, Japanese and Central Asians, walking the same streets, trading in the same markets, mingling their languages and customs into a rich and colorful blend. In the markets of Chang'an, the air would have been alive with sound and color and the smells of 100 different goods. Merchants called out their wares from crowded stalls piled high with silk and spices, jade and porcelain, exotic fruits, and strange treasures from faraway lands. Camels brought goods in from the Silk Road, and ships carried trade up the rivers and canals. Music drifted from the wine shops where dancers performed and poets gathered to share their verses. At night, the city glowed with lantern light, and the sounds of celebration filled the warm air. It was a place of wonder and energy, open to the whole world, confident and proud, the beating heart of the greatest empire on earth. For anyone who visited Chang'an in those days, it must have seemed like the very center of the universe. The Tang age was above all a golden age of poetry. The Chinese have always loved poetry, but during the Tang Dynasty, the art reached heights it had never reached before and would never quite reach again. Poetry was not just for scholars locked away in libraries. It was woven into the daily life of educated people, written at parties and farewells, on lonely journeys and quiet evenings, in moments of joy and moments of sorrow. The greatest poets of the Tang, men whose names are still beloved across China today, wrote verses of such beauty and feeling that they have been treasured for more than 1,000 years. They wrote of the moon and the mountains, of wine and friendship, of homesickness and the passing of time. Their words captured the deep feelings that all people share, and they speak as clearly to readers today as they did to the people of Chang'an so long ago. The Tang Dynasty was also remarkable for producing the only woman ever to rule China in her own name as emperor. Her name was Wu Zetian, and her rise to power was one of the most extraordinary stories in all of Chinese history. She began as a young woman in the imperial palace and slowly climbed her way to the very top through intelligence, determination, and ruthless skill. In a world where men held nearly all the power, she pushed aside everyone who stood in her way until she finally took the throne for herself and declared herself emperor. Many at the time were shocked and outraged that a woman should hold such power, and her enemies told dark stories about her cruelty. But whatever her methods, Wu Zetian proved to be a capable and effective ruler. She governed the empire firmly, promoted talented officials regardless of their birth, and kept China strong and prosperous during her long reign. The Tang Dynasty showed the world what Chinese civilization could become when it reached its full strength. It was open to the world rather than closed off from it, welcoming foreign ideas, foreign faiths, and foreign peoples into the heart of the empire. It valued learning and beauty as much as power and wealth. It produced art and poetry that would be treasured forever, and it built a society so advanced that the rest of the world looked to China with wonder and respect. Travelers from distant lands carried home stories of its splendor, and neighboring countries copied its writing, its government, and its culture. The glow of the Tang spread far beyond China's borders, shaping the civilizations of Korea, Japan, and Vietnam, leaving a mark that can still be seen in those lands today. For a few shining centuries, China stood at the very summit of the world, and the memory of that golden age would inspire the Chinese people through all the harder times that lay ahead. Like every dynasty before it, the Tang eventually weakened and fell, and after another short period of division, a new dynasty rose to reunite the land. This was the Song dynasty, and though it was not as militarily mighty as the Tang, it brought about one of the most remarkable ages of invention and progress the world has ever seen. The Song was a time of cities and commerce, of clever minds and busy markets, an age when China quietly invented many of the things that would later transform the entire world. If the Tang was an age of poetry and splendor, the Song was an age of ingenuity and trade, a time when the Chinese mind turned to solving practical problems in ways no one had ever managed before. The Song cities were unlike anything else in the world at that time. They were enormous, crowded, and bursting with life and business. While the great cities of Europe were still small and quiet, Song China had cities with more than 1 million people, filled with shops, restaurants, theaters, and markets that stayed open late into the night. The streets were crowded with merchants and craftsmen, entertainers and food sellers, all buying and selling in a busy whirl of commerce. For the first time in human history, a society was becoming truly commercial, with a large part of the population making their living through trade and crafts rather than farming. The wealth that flowed through these cities supported a comfortable and sophisticated way of life that astonished the few foreign travelers who saw it. The Song dynasty produced a stream of inventions so important that they would eventually reshape the whole world. One of the greatest was printing. The Chinese had already learned to print by carving whole pages onto wooden blocks, but during the Song, a craftsman invented movable type, separate pieces for each character that could be arranged and rearranged to print any text. This made books cheaper and easier to produce than ever before, spreading knowledge widely through Chinese society. Another world-changing invention was gunpowder, which the Chinese first developed and used in fireworks and then in weapons of war. The Song also perfected the magnetic compass, a device that pointed always to the south and north, allowing sailors to find their way across the open sea even when they could not see the stars or the shore. Perhaps the most surprising Song invention was paper money. For thousands of years, people everywhere had traded using heavy coins of metal. But the Song merchants found that carrying large amounts of metal money was difficult and dangerous. So the Chinese began to use printed notes of paper that stood in place of metal coins, the first true paper money in the history of the world. This made trade faster and easier and helped the Song economy grow into the most advanced of its age. It would be many centuries before the rest of the world caught up with these ideas, and many of them came to the West only slowly, carried along the same trade routes that had once carried silk. Printing, gunpowder, the compass, and paper money. These four Chinese inventions would eventually help create the modern world, transforming how people learned, fought, traveled, and traded everywhere on Earth. The Song was also an age of great beauty and refinement, when Chinese painting, poetry, and philosophy reached new heights. Song painters created delicate landscapes of misty mountains and quiet rivers, capturing the peaceful spirit of nature with a few graceful strokes of the brush. Scholars gathered to discuss philosophy and to revive and deepen the teachings of Confucius for a new age. Fine porcelain, the beautiful pottery the world would later simply call China, was perfected during this time, prized for its smooth glaze and delicate beauty. It was a sophisticated and cultured age, prosperous and clever, when China seemed poised to lead the world into a new era of progress. Yet for all its brilliance and wealth, the Song had one great weakness. Its armies were not as strong as its markets and its workshops, and far to the north, a storm was gathering that would test China as it had never been tested before. Far beyond the northern frontier of China, out on the vast grasslands of the steppe, a new power was rising that would shake the entire world. These were the Mongols, nomadic horsemen who lived in felt tents and moved with their herds across the endless grasslands. For most of history, the Mongols had been scattered into many small tribes that fought one another and posed little threat to the great settled empires. But then a single leader appeared who united all the Mongol tribes under his command, and his name would become one of the most feared in all of human history. He was Genghis Khan, and he forged the scattered Mongols into the most fearsome fighting force the world had ever seen. The Mongols were unlike any enemy China had faced before. They were superb horsemen who could ride for days and shoot their bows with deadly accuracy from the saddle. Their armies moved with astonishing speed, striking suddenly and vanishing before their enemies could respond. They were disciplined, organized, and utterly ruthless in war. Under Genghis Khan and the leaders who followed him, the Mongols swept out of their grasslands and conquered an empire larger than any the world had ever known, stretching from the shores of the Pacific Ocean all the way to the gates of Europe. Cities that resisted them were destroyed without mercy, and the terror of their name went before them, causing many to surrender without a fight. It was an age of conquest on a scale that had never been seen and would never be seen again. For China, the coming of the Mongols was a catastrophe. The Mongol armies pressed against the northern borders and slowly, over many years of brutal warfare, conquered one part of China after another. The northern kingdoms fell first, and then the Mongols turned their fury against the wealthy Song dynasty in the south. The Song fought desperately to survive, defending their cities with all the cleverness and determination they possessed. The war dragged on for decades, longer than the Mongols had needed to conquer almost any other land, for the Chinese were determined and their cities were strong. But in the end, even the resilient Song could not hold back the Mongol tide. The conquest of China was completed by Genghis Khan's grandson, a leader named Kublai Khan, who finally crushed the last Song resistance and brought all of China under Mongol rule. For the first time in its long history, the whole of China was ruled by foreign conquerors. Kublai Khan declared himself Emperor of China and founded a new dynasty, which he called the Yuan. He moved his capital to the city we now know as Beijing and set himself up as the ruler of the most populous and sophisticated land on earth. It must have been a strange and bitter time for the Chinese people to find themselves ruled by horsemen from the northern grasslands, by people who spoke a different language and followed different customs. The Mongols kept much of the power in their own hands and in the hands of foreign officials, treating the Chinese as a conquered people in their own homeland. The proud civilization that had stood for thousands of years now bowed to outside masters. Yet even in conquest, the deep strength of Chinese civilization showed itself. Kublai Khan and his Mongol rulers discovered that it was far easier to conquer China than to rule it. The vast Chinese empire could not be governed in the rough manner of the steppe. It needed the skilled officials, the careful records, the organized government that the Chinese had perfected over thousands of years. And so, slowly, the Mongol rulers found themselves adopting Chinese ways in order to govern their new empire. They used Chinese methods of administration, relied on Chinese knowledge, and ruled through the systems the Chinese had built. The conquerors were being shaped by the very civilization they had conquered. During the Mongol age, China was more connected to the outside world than ever before, for it was now part of a vast empire that stretched across most of Asia. Under Mongol rule, the Silk Road was safe and open, and trade and travel flowed freely across the great empire. It was during this time that travelers from distant Europe were able to journey all the way to China and return with wondrous tales of its wealth and splendor. The most famous of these travelers brought back stories of a land so rich and advanced that the people of Europe could scarcely believe them. These tales of Chinese cities, with their paper money, their coal fires, their great canals and crowded markets, filled the imagination of the West and would one day inspire European explorers to seek a way to reach the riches of the East. The Mongol conquest had been a terrible blow, but it had also opened a window between China and the wider world that would change the course of history. Mongol rule over China did not last as long as the conquerors had hoped. The Yuan dynasty held power for less than a century before it too began to crumble. The Mongols were great warriors, but less skilled at the patient work of governing, and over time their rule grew weak and disorganized. Floods and famines struck the land. The great river burst its banks and brought disaster, and the people suffered terribly while the government failed to help them. To the Chinese, the meaning of these troubles was clear. The Mongols had lost the mandate of heaven, and the time had come for them to fall. Across the land, rebellions broke out against the foreign rulers, and the Chinese people rose up to drive the conquerors from their soil and restore their own rule. The leader who finally succeeded in overthrowing the Mongols came from the very bottom of society. He was born into a poor peasant family, and as a child, he had known terrible hardship. When famine and plague swept through his region, his parents and most of his family died, leaving him orphaned and alone. He survived for a time as a beggar and then as a monk in a Buddhist monastery, knowing hunger and poverty in his very bones. From these desperate beginnings, he rose to join the rebellion against the Mongols, and through courage, cunning, and sheer determination, he climbed to become its leader. One by one, he defeated his rivals and drove the Mongol rulers out of China, and at last, he declared himself emperor of a new dynasty. This was the Ming dynasty, and it would rule China for nearly 300 years. The rise of this peasant emperor proved once again the deep truth of the mandate of heaven. In China, even a beggar and an orphan could rise to rule all under heaven if the times were right, and heaven favored him. The new emperor was determined to restore Chinese rule and Chinese ways after the long years of foreign domination. He swept away the last traces of Mongol power and brought back the old systems of government, the examinations, and the Confucian officials who had run China in the great dynasties of the past. He worked tirelessly, ruling with an iron will, determined to build a strong and lasting dynasty that would never again fall to foreign conquerors. The dragon throne of China was once more held by Chinese hands, and the civilization that had endured the Mongol storm began to rebuild its strength and its pride. The Ming dynasty became famous for its great building projects, and the greatest of all was the magnificent palace complex in the new capital at Beijing. This was the Forbidden City, an enormous walled palace of golden roofs and red walls, of grand halls and quiet courtyards, where the emperor lived and ruled in splendor. It was called Forbidden because ordinary people were not allowed to enter, and within its walls lived the emperor, his family, and the thousands of officials and servants who served the throne. The Forbidden City was a world within a world, a place of strict ceremony and ancient ritual, where the emperor sat upon the dragon throne as the Son of Heaven, the link between the human world and the divine. Built nearly 600 years ago, this great palace still stands in the heart of Beijing today, one of the most magnificent buildings on earth. The Ming also rebuilt and strengthened the Great Wall, transforming it into the mighty stone barrier that we know today. The wall the first emperor had built long ago was made mostly of packed earth, but the Ming built theirs of brick and stone, with tall watchtowers and broad ramparts winding across the mountains for thousands of miles. This was the greatest version of the Great Wall ever made, a stupendous work of labor and engineering that snaked across the northern frontier like an endless dragon of stone. Its purpose was to keep out the nomadic peoples of the north, the same threat that had troubled China for thousands of years. The Great Wall of China that millions of visitors marvel at today is mostly the work of the Ming dynasty, a lasting monument to their determination to protect their land. In its early years, the Ming dynasty also looked outward to the sea in a way China had never done before. The emperor commanded the building of enormous fleets of ships, the largest wooden ships the world had ever seen, and sent them sailing across the oceans on great voyages of trade and diplomacy. These treasure fleets were led by a remarkable admiral named Zheng He, and they sailed across the vast Indian Ocean, reaching Southeast Asia, India, Arabia, and even the distant coasts of Africa. The ships carried Chinese goods and brought back exotic treasures, including strange animals that astonished the Chinese court, such as a giraffe brought all the way from Africa. These voyages happened decades before European explorers set out across the oceans, and the Chinese ships were far larger and more advanced than anything Europe could build at the time. But then, at the height of its sea power, China made a fateful choice. The great voyages were stopped, the mighty treasure fleets were left to rot, and China turned away from the sea. The rulers decided that these costly voyages brought little benefit, and that China was better off looking inward and protecting its own borders, rather than exploring distant lands. So China closed itself off from the wider world, just as Europe was beginning to reach outward across the oceans. It was one of the great turning points in history, for in the centuries that followed, it would be European ships, not Chinese ones, that sailed to every corner of the globe. China remained powerful and prosperous, but it had chosen a quieter path, turning its gaze inward toward its own ancient ways, while the world beyond its borders began to change in ways that would one day reach even the Middle Kingdom. The Ming Dynasty, like all those before it, eventually weakened and fell. In its final years, it was troubled by corruption, by harsh taxes, by famine and rebellion, the familiar signs of a dynasty losing the mandate of heaven. And once again, conquerors came from the north. This time, they were the Manchus, a people from the lands beyond the Great Wall, to the northeast of China. The Manchus were skilled warriors and clever rulers, and when the Ming dynasty collapsed into chaos and rebellion, they seized their chance. They swept through the gates of the Great Wall, marched into Beijing, and made themselves the new masters of China. They founded the Qing dynasty, which would be the last imperial dynasty in all of Chinese history. For the second time, China was ruled by a people from beyond its borders, just as it had been under the Mongols. But the Qing rulers were far more successful than the Mongols had been at governing China and making their rule last. They were careful and intelligent, and they understood that to rule China, they must respect and work within Chinese traditions. The Qing emperors kept the Confucian system of government, honored the ancient ways, and presented themselves as proper Chinese emperors, the legitimate holders of the mandate of heaven. At the same time, they kept their own Manchu identity and customs, ruling as both Manchu warriors and Chinese emperors. Through this careful balance, the Qing managed to win the acceptance of the Chinese people and to rule the vast empire for more than 2.5 centuries. The early Qing dynasty was a time of great strength and prosperity, guided by several brilliant emperors who were among the most capable rulers in Chinese history. These emperors reigned for extraordinarily long periods, ruling wisely and expanding the empire to its greatest size ever. Under the Qing, China grew to include vast new territories, stretching deep into Central Asia and the Far West, encompassing many different peoples and lands. The population grew enormously, and the country flourished in peace and prosperity. The arts and learning thrived. Great works of scholarship were produced, and Chinese porcelain, silk, and tea were prized throughout the world. At its height, the Qing Empire was one of the largest, richest, and most powerful states on earth, the proud heir to thousands of years of Chinese civilization. Yet even as the Qing reached the peak of its power, deep cracks were beginning to form beneath the surface. The very things that had made China strong were now becoming weaknesses in a changing world. China remained proud and confident in its ancient ways, certain that it was the center of the world and that it had little to learn from foreigners. But far away, across the oceans, the nations of Europe were transforming themselves through new science, new machines, and new ways of making war. While China looked inward and trusted in its old traditions, Europe was racing forward into a new age of industry and power. The Chinese rulers did not see the danger, for they could not imagine that the foreigners they regarded as distant barbarians could ever threaten the greatness of the Middle Kingdom. The population that had grown so large in times of plenty now began to strain the land beyond what it could feed. There was not enough farmland for all the people, and poverty and hunger spread among the common folk. The government, grown old and set in its ways, struggled to manage the vast empire and its many problems. Corruption crept into the offices of state, and the once mighty Qing began slowly to weaken, just as every dynasty had weakened before it. The signs that the Chinese had read for thousands of years were appearing again. The troubles and hardships that suggested a dynasty was losing the mandate of heaven. But this time, the challenge that came would be unlike any that China had faced before in all its long history. This time, the storm would come not from the northern grasslands, but from across the distant seas, from a world that China had chosen to ignore. The final chapter of Imperial China was one of the most painful in all its long story, an age of storms that shook the ancient civilization to its very foundations. It began with a conflict over trade. European merchants, especially the British, wanted to buy China's tea, silk, and porcelain, but the Chinese wanted little that Europe had to offer in return. To balance the trade, foreign merchants began to bring a dangerous drug into China, a substance that spread misery and addiction among the Chinese people. When the Chinese government tried to stop this harmful trade, it led to war with the powerful nations of the West. These were terrible wars for China, because the European armies and navies, armed with the latest weapons of the industrial age, were far more powerful than China's old-fashioned forces. China, which had thought itself the center of the world, was humbled and defeated by foreign powers from across the sea. This part of the story is one that must be told honestly, even in a quiet telling like this one. The defeats China suffered were deeply humiliating, and they forced the proud empire to make painful concessions to the foreign powers. China had to open its ports to foreign trade on terms it could not control, give up territory, and accept the presence of foreigners who lived by their own laws on Chinese soil. The country that had stood at the summit of the world for so long now found itself weak and divided, carved into spheres of influence by stronger nations. The Chinese people felt the bitterness of this decline keenly, and many came to believe that the old ways had failed them, that China needed to change deeply if it was ever to be strong again. The long confidence of thousands of years had been broken, and a painful new age had begun. The troubles came not only from outside, but from within as well. The suffering of the people led to massive rebellions that tore through the country, the largest and most terrible of which cost the lives of tens of millions of people. The Qing dynasty, already weakened by foreign defeats, struggled to survive these enormous uprisings. The government tried to reform and modernize, to build new factories and new armies, and to learn from the foreigners who had defeated them. But the changes came too slowly and too late. The ancient system that had served China for thousands of years could not keep pace with the rapidly changing modern world. The mandate of heaven, which had passed from dynasty to dynasty across the ages, was slipping away from the imperial system itself, and this time no new dynasty would rise to take its place. At last, after more than 2,000 years, the age of emperors came to an end. In the early years of the 20th century, a revolution swept through China and overthrew the Qing dynasty. The last emperor was only a small child when the throne was finally given up. A little boy, who had ruled an empire he could not understand and who lived to see his world swept away. With his fall, the long line of emperors that stretched all the way back through the dynasties, back through the Ming and the Tang and the Han, back to the first emperor and beyond him to the legendary kings of the dawn, came at last to its end. The dragon throne was empty forever, and the imperial system that had defined China for thousands of years was gone. It was the end of one of the longest chapters in all of human history. The years that followed the fall of the empire were hard and troubled ones for China. The country struggled through decades of division, conflict, and great suffering as it searched for a new way to govern itself in the modern world. Different groups fought for control, and China endured terrible wars and invasions during this difficult time. It was a long and painful passage from the ancient world of emperors into the modern age, and the Chinese people paid a heavy price for it. Yet through all this turmoil, something endured that had endured through every other storm in China's long history. The civilization itself survived. The writing, the language, the deep memory of a shared past stretching back thousands of years, all of these lived on through the hardest of times, just as they had lived on through every age of trouble before. And so, we come to the end of our long journey through time, from the muddy banks of the Yellow River, where it all began, all the way down through the ages to the modern world. We have traveled across more than 4,000 years, through dozens of dynasties, watching empires rise and fall like the turning of the seasons. We have seen China conquered and broken many times, and we have seen it rise again every single time, always finding a way to begin anew. No other civilization on Earth has lived so long or endured so much and still survived. The question we asked at the very beginning has stayed with us through the whole story. Why did this one civilization last when so many others crumbled into dust and were forgotten? The answer lies in all the things we have seen along the way. It lies in the writing that never broke, carrying knowledge and memory across thousands of years from the oracle bones of the Shang to the present day. It lies in the deep ideas of Confucius and Laozi, the shared values that bound the people together even when the land was divided. It lies in the patient skill of governing, the trained officials and careful systems that even foreign conquerors had to adopt in order to rule. And it lies in the belief in the mandate of heaven, the great rhythm that let China fall and rise again without ever losing the thread of who it was. Through all of it ran one quiet truth, that a civilization held together by shared ideas and shared memory is far harder to destroy than any empire held together by force alone. We have walked a very long road together tonight, through the rise and fall of many worlds, and now we come gently to its end. Let us return one last time to where it all began, to the wide muddy plains of the Yellow River as the day fades into evening. The great river still flows there now as it has flowed for countless ages, carrying its pale soil down from the highlands toward the distant sea, just as it did when the first farmers settled on its banks so long ago. The water moves slowly in the fading light, patient and steady and old beyond all telling, having watched the whole of this long story unfold along its shores. Empires came and went upon these plains. Kings and conquerors rose and fell, but the river simply flowed on, quiet and enduring, the way it always has. And perhaps that is the truest image of this long, lasting civilization. A great river flowing on through the ages, sometimes flooding and sometimes calm, sometimes changing its course, but never stopping and never disappearing. It carries within it everything that came before, all the memory of all the years, moving slowly and steadily into the days yet to come. Rest now, dear listener, and let the gentle sound of that ancient river carry you softly towards sleep. Thank you for traveling through the long centuries with me tonight. Sleep well, and may your rest be deep